Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Soulful and Wild show. And today you've got me, and I'd like to share with you some ideas around making change, because change is not comfortable. Most of us dislike change. We like certainty, we like things to flow along without too much effort. That would be normal for the majority of us. Even those of us who have a bit of an adventurous, streak would like it to be on our terms usually. Now, change, whether it is being comfortable getting on an aeroplane or a train or a bus or losing weight or something else entirely, change requires effort, and that is an ugly truth. A lot of the time, we do actually expect that something magical is going to happen and the weight will come off, or we'll be able to be completely comfortable speaking in public, like magic. But of course, magic doesn't happen. There are certain things, for example, in hypnosis where we can do a little bit of magic, but it is our own mind, this powerhouse, that determines even how well something like hypnosis will work. And I don't want to take away any of the mystique or magic about hypnosis, don't misunderstand me, but I would like to share this idea with you that it's us. We're the ones that have the real power. And, what happens when people have issues that they want to change? There's usually a lot of energy is actually put into fearing that the thing will happen. So I'll just speak to, fears around flying just for the sake of the conversation, to keep it simple, so I don't have to keep giving you lots and lots of examples for it to make sense. You just adjust it according to what makes sense to you, if you would, and that would be nice. So I'm going to share a link with you in the blurb that goes with this episode of a little excerpt that you can see. I don't know if you've heard of Derren Brown. He's a mentalist, and he actually does a little setup. And this guy, Henry, his name, that's who he's known as, he works in a circus, and he holds the Guinness Book of Records for skipping for the longest period of time on a high rise, on one of those high ropes in the circus, the main tent, And anyway, he'd never fallen. But what happened is, with Derren Brown, he actually made a suggestion to Henry, and because of that suggestion, he started thinking negatively. He started thinking about wobbling or falling, which is something that he'd never done. He had no evidence to support that, but his mind started to go there. And so he actually fell. And this is something that is really key for us to understand. It links in with something that was discovered by a guy by the name of Emile Coué, and I apologise if I've pronounced that incorrectly. I think he was a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I can't remember now. But he discovered this thing that happens. So let's just say we want to be able to fly with comfort and with ease, without any concern whatsoever. And we can even put a lot of effort into making that happen. And yet there's a part of us that is really worried that the opposite will happen. And so what actually occurs in the mind is that thing that we are worrying about, our mind moves to there, and then we move into that. That's fundamentally what we create. Sometimes in therapeutic situations, I ask clients to imagine what it is they want, not what they don't want. And I'll often suggest to them that they spend 1 or 2 minutes in the morning and at night imagining what they want to have happen. Now, sometimes they do that and sometimes they don't. But I always know if they've been throwing in that negative thing at the end, they're not doing well. So in terms of, changing their own mind. So it's a really important thing for us to focus on what we want and to stop that overthinking, that brooding, that because otherwise that's what we put energy to, and that's what happens, that thing that we don't want to have happen, even when we're working hard to make sure it doesn't. So yeah, I'll send you that link with this. What did I want to tell you? The other thing is, in our lives, most of the time, 99.999% of the time anyway, we have so much evidence that we have been successful at overcoming difficult situations, things and circumstances where many people would falter or fail or just give up because it's too hard. And yet you yourself and me too, we've all have lots and lots of evidence that we've been able to stay the distance for something and really stay focused and do whatever's necessary to get over the line, shall we say. And yet when a person is thinking negatively, they focus instead on that thing they don't want to have happen. Now, where does that come from? I mean, yes, it's negative thinking, and people tend to just let their heads go wild. They don't even pull it in. They don't put a stop to it, They just kind of surrender. Now, what causes that? It's so fascinating, isn't it? Because it can be somebody who's really powerful, really got their act together in so many arenas in their life, with so much evidence that they've got the goods, they get stuff done against all odds. And yet there's this idea that they nurture and protect, that they are helpless to overcome, X, the flying, shall we say. So it's interesting. The other thing is the magic aspect, let's be real. There is no such thing as magical when we want to do something that's challenging. If you want to fly, you've got to face your fears. You've got to stop that negative thinking. Same thing if you want to lose weight. You've got to actually look, use your logic and common sense. Look at what you're consuming in terms of calorie content, the kinds of foods, how much is on your plate, what times you eat. You've got to look at those things. Those things are logical. You don't just hope and wish and that it's going to change. It doesn't change. We have to take some responsibility and make some adjustments. There is always going to be a little bit of pain in creating change. And once we come to grips with that, life does get a little bit easier, much easier actually, because we suck it up. We make the decision that, yes, this is important. If you do, when you really look at it, is it worth the discomfort? It's something that we have to ask ourselves. Look at the negatives and the positives. It's going to be painful. Is it worth the pain? It's a bit like this. All right. One of the things, I've actually got this little quote here that I wrote down. When the imagination and the will are in conflict, the imagination invariably wins, because that's what we're putting our energy into, yeah. So change is a big deal, and so many people struggle with that. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that, number one, we really need to look at, do we actually want to make that change? Yes. Is it a nice idea, or is it something that you absolutely really need to see done? And if that's the case, look at the other logical things. What's involved in getting yourself over the line? Are you prepared to put in the time and the energy and the effort to experience the discomfort of making those changes and adjustments, is it worth it? Is it worth it to you? And if it is, then you're really going to have to map out a process to make that happen. One of the things I'll often talk about is stop. Over time, I've said to a few people, you have to stop that mind from going down that bumpy road. And I've had a couple of people over the years go to me, Karen, if I could just stop it, I wouldn't be talking to you. And I think sometimes they really want to smack my hand, and I get that completely. But of course, I don't mean stop. Oh, stop here. Clearly that's not going to work. What we actually need to do is to really put a chock in underneath that wheel so it can't turn. And what that is in NLP terms, neuro-linguistic programming terms, is an actual pattern breaker, a circuit breaker. So if you were to say stop, you've got to kind of say it loud enough and intensely enough that it shocks you and pulls you up. I'll often tell people a little story about my son. Years ago, I lived in Cancun, a valley, in the Kiwa Valley, and it was one of those places where, we had the open fireplace, and at this particular time, my husband used to work away from home, and so I'd often be there without a car, and it was a really old farmhouse, right? When you pull the plug out in the bath, you could actually see the ground underneath. It just ran down. It was a very interesting building, let me tell you. I think it had been built during the war. Anyway, and I sometimes wonder whether they actually used to have a bath in the creek out the back myself. But anyway, so basically what I'm trying to get at is that the dog used to run under the house sometimes and pull the phone wire out. Unhelpful, very unhelpful. So on this particular day, this is a story I tell people, and it's actually a true thing. On this particular day, I've got the baby in the bouncinette and the toddler in his bedroom playing with blocks. And of course, my husband used to go and collect the wood. So I had no real deep appreciation for just how much hard work that was. And so I used to have the fire burning brightly like the goddess Hestia. It was warm as toast in that house. Anyhow, I moved the fire grid, those little three-pronged sort of wire things. I forget what they're called now, but anyway, boom, lifted it. The baby was not moving, and I walked through the kitchen, through the built-in veranda, and out onto the actual veranda where the wood was, grabbed an armload full, walked back through, and as I walked into the kitchen, very long room, I kicked the door shut. I looked up, and my toddler was running because he never walked at that time. He walks now, but back then he used to run. And the door was at the other end of the kitchen and it went straight into the lounge room. And he was very fixated. So he's running and I see him, and there is absolutely no way that I'm going to be able to intercept him before he hits the fire. So obviously I just dropped that wood and I launched myself towards him. He's in motion running and he's very close to the fire. So I didn't say to him, "Oh, darling, stop." I didn't do that. I yelled like a crazed woman, "Stop!" It's so loud. I don't want to yell like that now because I'll scare you. But so loud and so intensely because I was absolutely terrified, because in my mind, in that split second, was that realization that there was no phone connected, there was no car, I was miles from a hospital. I was no way going to be able to get him help if he went into that fire, and it was a pretty big fire. So I screamed, "Stop!" And I screamed it so intensely and so loudly that not only do I think the roof actually lifted, but it caused him to almost stop, and he kind of rocked like that. That pause was just enough time and made the difference. And I grabbed the back of his jumper and pulled him away from the fire. And he doesn't have a mark on him. In fact, he doesn't know that ever happened. So that's the kind of stop I'm talking about, where you scream it so loud and it's so intense, so forced, that you would be saving someone's life, like yours. So you can't just, if you want to stop the way that mind is going, if you're starting to brood and imagine the negative things, you've got to scream stop, as though you are stopping some kid from running out in front of a truck after a ball, something like that, really intense. And of course, you need to build the positive picture. So how can you do that? Let's say, for example, you wanted to go on a trip and you had that fear of flying. Rather than focusing on trying to pretend that you're going to be okay, it's way better to actually jump your mind to that point of pleasure of you being on the trip. So you kind of skip the painful bits and imagine yourself maybe having a cold one on a deck overlooking the ocean or the ski slopes or something like that, and just feeling that wonderful feeling of ease and accomplishment, that there you are on your fabulous holiday. And building that positive feeling, that is really a useful thing to do as well. So I'm talking about a couple of things here. Imagining what it actually is that you want and not imagining what you don't want. That's a really key piece. Yep. And being prepared to do some work. In whatever form that is for you, because it depends on the thing that you're going to work on, So, some thoughts on change. Change takes effort. Yes, positive input of data is very important. And, something like, the application of logic too. Really looking at whether is it worth the effort. Don't BS yourself. If it's not worth the effort, if you're not prepared to do the work, then don't put yourself through the pain and suffering of only half doing it. Get real and do what's necessary. Hard words, really, aren't they? Hard words. It's amazing because when so many of us, can't do this and we can't do that, we tell ourselves that anyway. And yet, somebody who is facing death, potential death, just say someone gets a really bad health diagnosis, suddenly they can actually eat good. They can eat all the right things in the right quantities and make sure they're hydrated. They can do all of those things because their focus, the pain value has shifted. Now being hydrated enough and eating the right foods is way less of an issue than dying. So they can do the thing. It really does come down to that. What is most important to you? Getting real about that can make a big difference. Yeah. Uncomfortable, isn't it? Very uncomfortable. Anyway, just some thoughts to share with you. So think about Coué's law of reversed effort is what it's really called. I often refer to it as the law of reversed effect, because we actually do get the opposite effect to what we really want, I think, sometimes. Yeah. So logic and common sense, being prepared to take control of the mind and pull it in, use that stop. If you're in a car driving somewhere and you have those negative thoughts start, scream stop. at the top of your voice. The windows aren't going to break. No one's going to hear you if you're in the car on your own. No problem. Really practice breaking through. So incredible when you do that. And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy and consciousness to be on top of your thinking. I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. But if you really want to get change in a particular area of your life, it is totally doable. It's all about what creates more pain. And us humans, we move away from pain. That is a powerful motivator for us. Moving away from pain and moving towards pleasure is a winning system. Yeah, I'll be interested to hear from you on what you feel is useful in this little verbalization about, change and how we can make our changes more successful and long lasting rather than just the 1 or 2 day feel good before we fail. Yeah. So, Cooey's Law, check out this little link that I've included in the blurb on Darren Brown and his setup of Henry, because it's a perfect example of how it works. All right. And the thing is, we are our own enemy. It's our constant thinking about what that thing that we fear, that's what puts us there. Anyway, all the best to you, thinking about change. And you know what? Why am I talking about change in this spiritually based kind of podcast? Well, it's easy. All of us, if we're going to move forward, to advance, to up level, to be better, stronger, more inspired than we were before, we need to make change, because nothing changes if we don't. Anyway, have a great day and thanks for tuning in. See you.